The United States continues to ramp up military aid to Ukraine. But in recent days, the world has been discussing not just another delivery package. The internet exploded with news that struck like thunder out of a clear sky. Donald Trump allegedly handed over to Kyiv, attention, 3,330 brand new missiles. The number looks too precise, too flashy to be a coincidence, and too threatening to ignore. It sounds like a sensation. But what really hides behind this figure? Is it reality or a carefully staged spectacle? Some insiders insist that part of these missiles may not just be conventional weapons but carriers of nuclear warheads. Fact or fear-mongering? The world has frozen in anticipation of an answer. So, what do we actually know at this point? On blogs and political commentary shows, a claim has circulated. Ukraine is allegedly set to receive 3,330 missiles with a range of up to 400 kilometers and a warhead weighing more than 500 pounds. One fact remains undeniable. Washington is indeed considering expanding military aid to Kyiv. Leading American outlets have reported on this. We are talking about air-to-ground missiles, systems capable of striking deep into the enemy's rear. And here is where it gets especially interesting. Some analysts argued that the figure of 527 pounds for the warhead was not chosen at random. They say it is the minimum weight required for a nuclear payload. If that version is true, then out of the 3,330 units of weaponry, about 30 could theoretically carry nuclear warheads. According to supporters of this theory, that would be enough to destroy Russia's largest cities, from Moscow and St. Petersburg to Rostov and Yekaterinburg. A coincidence? Hardly. The open question is, why is this story being pushed right now? Fact remains fact. Not once have US officials uttered the words 30 nuclear missiles. What has been confirmed is something else. The United States is indeed strengthening military support for Ukraine. And Trump, back in the political arena, has made this subject one of his main trump cards. American media write about a new security package. European politicians argue over who will foot the bill. Meanwhile, in Moscow, there is demonstrative silence. Official statements sound dry. Everything is under control. But behind the scenes, the situation looks far more tense. According to insiders, the Kremlin urgently held closed meetings. They discussed not only the fact of new deliveries, but also a possible scenario in which nuclear-capable missiles appear on Ukrainian soil. Rumor has it, this is precisely why Putin made sudden visits to military facilities. Officially described as routine inspections, the timing looked far too convenient. And here arises the key question. Afternoon, European officials urgently gather for closed-door consultations. Formally, they discuss how to divide expenses for military support. But between the lines, it becomes clear Washington wants to shift a significant portion of the costs onto Europe. For Brussels, this is painful. Amid an energy crisis and skyrocketing gas prices, any additional burden sparks irritation and political friction. Evening, Moscow. Officials issue short, dry comments. Everything is under control. No loud statements, no direct threats. But insiders insist, behind closed doors, the Kremlin feverishly discussed possible scenarios. According to sources close to the military, the discussions were not only about the fact of new deliveries but also about the possibility that Ukraine might become a platform for deploying special types of warheads, and that specific risk, they say, caused the greatest alarm. Rumors claim that during these same days, Putin made unexpected trips to military installations. Officially described as planned inspections, the timing coincided perfectly with the surge of rumors about 3,330 missiles. Coincidence? Too convenient. One fact remains. Washington has never mentioned supplying nuclear weapons. But the sheer scale of the story, thousands of missiles with a range of up to 400 kilometers, already acts as a factor of pressure. Now let's look at Europe. For them, this issue is double-edged. On one hand, security. If Ukraine truly fields such missiles, Russia will see itself on the verge of encirclement. Moscow's reaction is predictable. Heightened military readiness and talk of red lines. On the other hand, economics. Europe is already cracking under the weight of energy prices. Any escalation increases the risk of freezing without gas, collapsing industrial plants, and sparking public discontent. So the rhetorical question arises, who benefits in such a situation? America gains an opportunity to strengthen its military-industrial complex while forcing Europe to foot the bill. Moscow gains an information pretext for mobilization and justification of harsher measures. And Europe finds itself between a hammer and an anvil, forced to react, even though it is neither economically nor politically prepared for a new arms race. And here lies the paradox. Even if the figure 3330 has no solid foundation, its very existence in the media sets processes in motion that change reality. In Washington, it is presented as expanded support. In Moscow, it is seen as a direct threat to national security. In Europe, it looks like a nightmare scenario, paying for someone else's game while risking its own stability. And Ukraine, as before, remains the front line, not only on the ground, but also in the information battlefield. Now let's look at the central knot of this story. The number 3,330 has become more than just statistics. It has turned into a weapon in its own right. Think about it. It's too round, too convenient for headlines. It's easy to remember, easy to repeat, easy to turn into a meme. And precisely for that reason, it instantly captured the media space. In an information war, numbers can sometimes be more dangerous than missiles. Because they don't strike infrastructure, they strike the imagination of millions of people. The picture in people's minds forms almost automatically. America supplies Ukraine with thousands of missiles. Among them, there are allegedly dozens of nuclear ones. Moscow is given a pretext for retaliatory action. And here begins the chain reaction. For Washington, this is merely a demonstration of strength, expanded support within the usual policy framework. For Moscow, it is a signal that Ukraine is becoming a springboard for a potential strike. For Europe, it's a dreadful dilemma: pay for the weapons and live in fear of escalation. But the most crucial factor is public perception. Ordinary news consumers rarely dig into details. They hear a striking number, see hints of nuclear warheads, and draw their own conclusions. What follows is a flood of emotions, a psychological avalanche stronger than any diplomatic statement. This is how a number turns into a weapon of mass influence. One fact remains clear. No international body has confirmed that Ukraine possesses nuclear warheads. But hundreds of long-range systems have already been delivered. That makes the story plausible, even if 30 is nothing more than an informational provocation. Now let's draw a historical parallel. Remember the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. Back then, the world was shaken by the discovery of real missiles on Cuba. Today, it's not hardware on the ground, but figures in the media. And yet the effect feels eerily similar. Tension, fear, the sense that the world stands on the brink of disaster. And once again, the question arises: who benefits? Trump, who uses the Ukraine issue as a trump card in domestic politics. The Kremlin, which gains a formal pretext for mobilization and for justifying new escalatory steps, or perhaps other players orchestrating a far more complex strategy, forcing all sides to react to a myth carefully planted in the information space. Too neat a number, too loud, too convenient to be accidental. And that is why 3330 has become the dramatic climax of this entire story. So, the figure 3330 has played its role as a media virus. But what does it mean for the future? Let's examine three possible scenarios: baseline, stress, and optimistic. Scenario 1, baseline. The number turns out to be an exaggeration, but real deliveries continue. Ukraine receives new long-range missiles. They are not nuclear, but with a range of up to 400 kilometers, they can hit critical Russian targets: airfields, supply depots, command posts. Moscow interprets this as a direct threat to national security. The response is predictable: heightened military readiness, new countermeasures without analogs, and a surge in defense spending. The outcome? A new arms race in Europe, eroding trust among nations and draining resources at a time of economic fragility. Scenario 2, stress. The version about 30 nuclear missiles takes hold in the public imagination and begins to live a life of its own. No official confirmations exist, yet Moscow treats the threat literally. This provides the Kremlin with a formal pretext for sharp escalation. Demonstrative nuclear exercises are announced, missile systems are redeployed, statements about red lines fill the airwaves. The psychological effect is immediate. Even rumor becomes a tool of real politics. Consequences could be unpredictable, from a diplomatic crisis and new waves of sanctions to direct clashes. The most dangerous aspect? In such a climate, a single mistake, a miscalculation, or an accidental incident could ignite a global-scale catastrophe. Scenario 3. Optimistic. The 3330 story is ultimately recognized as an informational provocation, designed to test the reactions of the Kremlin and Europe. Paradoxically, such a scare could trigger renewed dialogue. Sometimes panic paves the way for negotiations. If all sides realize how easily the world believed in a frightening number, there may be momentum to discuss real security mechanisms. In this version, the digital sensation becomes a catalyst for compromise rather than conflict. But which scenario is most likely? Analysts lean toward the first. Actual supplies will continue even if the number has been inflated. Yet the stress scenario cannot be dismissed. In an environment of mistrust, even a rumor can serve as a weapon. The optimistic outcome is the most desirable, but also the least realistic. Europe feels particularly vulnerable in this dangerous game. On one side, pressure from Washington, demanding money and political support. On the other, Moscow's warnings of a harsh response. And within Europe itself, public frustration is growing. Citizens ask why their wallets and future stability are being sacrificed in someone else's geopolitical struggle. This is where the core problem lies. Even if the missiles are a myth, their shadow already influences politics, economics, and psychology. Fear becomes a strategic resource, and those who know how to manipulate fear gain an advantage greater than possession of thousands of actual missiles. And now we arrive at the final act of this story. If the missiles really exist in the form described by the rumors, the world stands at the threshold of a new arms race. And this would not be a local story limited to Ukraine and Russia. It would be a chain reaction spreading across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. Because the deployment of missiles with hundreds of kilometers of range at Russia's very doorstep automatically pulls NATO, China, Turkey, and even the Gulf states into the game. The balance of power collapses, replaced by a logic of total distrust. If, on the other hand, all of this is nothing more than a carefully staged myth launched into the information sphere, then it means we are living in an era where myths and numbers govern reality more powerfully than facts. A single catchy meme with the number 3030 can influence stock markets, sway negotiations behind closed doors, and shape the perception of millions. In such a case, the most terrifying weapon is not missiles nor even nuclear warheads, but imagination, skillfully directed through media. The main question remains open. Who stands behind this scenario? Ukraine's allies, eager to speed up the conflict's end and pressure Russia into retreat. Washington, using information attacks as part of Trump's political strategy. Moscow, which benefits from presenting itself as a besieged fortress in order to mobilize its society. Or shadow players, pursuing an even more complex goal, destabilizing all sides in pursuit of global chaos and fear. Coincidence? Hardly. Is the world ready for the truth when it finally emerges? Or are all participants already trapped in their own fears and illusions? Here, truth and lies are so tightly interwoven that reality itself becomes the scariest weapon of all. We have entered an era where words and numbers can trigger the same chain reactions as actual missile launches. And in this game, no one can feel truly safe. Russia might accept the idea of 3,330 conventional missiles, but will it believe in 30 nuclear ones? And what would that change in the global game? To grasp the drama of the moment, let's look at the timeline of events. Morning. American media publish reports on a new security package for Ukraine. These articles state directly the US is preparing to expand deliveries of long-range systems. The figure 3330 does not appear in official documents, but this neatly rounded number pops up in Telegram channels, blogs, and analytic shows, instantly becoming the focus of heated debate.